For today's video, we are back on Tier Maker, and I'm going to be giving every single NHL team a grade on how they've done this season, kind of based off of their expectations heading into the year, now that we're about 2 months into the 2019-20 season. Technically, it isn't 2 full months until December 2nd, but I rounded up a little bit because I did want to do this video today. Now, I did the same video about a month ago, and I think I'm going to continue to do this every single month, just because it'll be something cool to do as the season rolls along. We can kind of go back and look at where a team was 1 month and see how good or how bad they did throughout that month, and then see what their grade is, the next video. So I think that'll be pretty fun to do as the season goes along. But now, without wasting any more time, let's start off with the Ducks. Now, in last month's video, I probably gave the Ducks a lot better of a grade, probably up here, because they got off to a really good start, but since then they've kind of came back down to earth a little bit, and I'm just going to say they've been average so far this season, so I'm going to give them a grade of a C. Next up, we have the Arizona Coyotes, and 100% I'm going to give them a grade of an A. Everybody kind of expected them to get better heading into the season, but they're currently 6th place in the entire league with 33 points. And Phil Kessel hasn't even really gotten going yet, so if he does, this team could just be that much more dangerous. But I think it's really been the goaltending that's helped them so far. That tandem of Kemper and Ronta is one of, if not the best tandems in the league. Next up, we have the Bruins, the best team in the NHL. What more can I say? They get a grade of an A. David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand are just ridiculous. Pasta has like 23 goals in 25 games. He definitely could score 60 this year. They're off to a great start and definitely get an A. Next up, we have the Buffalo Sabres, and honestly, I'm going to give them a grade of a D just because it's the same thing we saw last season. How is it happening again? They get off to a great start to the season, and then they completely fall off and aren't playing good hockey at all. Maybe a coaching change needs to happen. That could be a little dramatic, but I don't know. Something's got to change there so they can find some consistency. Next up, we have the Calgary Flames. Like Buffalo, they get a D from me. They're the 1 seed in the Western Conference last year, and so far this season, they've been very disappointing, and the whole head coaching thing definitely doesn't help with all the stuff going on about Bill Peters. I'm not going to talk about it in this video. I'm sure you guys have already heard about it, but Calgary as a team so far this season, they get a D from me. Next up, we have the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm going to give them a B. They probably got an A in the first video, but they have cooled off a little bit, but are still one of the better teams in the NHL, so I give them a B. Now we have the Chicago Blackhawks, and I'm going to give them a C grade. Probably not too much high expectations for them heading into the year from most people, but they've been okay. I'm just going to say they've been average because they definitely have been playing better of late than they were in like the first month of the season. The Colorado Avalanche, I'm going to give them a grade of a B. If they were healthy, probably would have been up here around an A, and you can definitely make the argument I should give them an A anyways, just because of how good they've been with all the injuries they've sustained. But once this team's healthy, look out, because I think they're definitely like a Stanley Cup favorite. Moving on now to the Blue Jackets, I'm going to give them a C as well because they've kind of just been average to start the season, and nobody really expected them to be really bad or to be really good, so I feel like they're kind of living up to expectations as just an average team now. The Dallas Stars, man, I'm going to give them a B, but I was close to giving them an A, but this is based off of the full season, and to start the year, they were awful, but lately have been one of the more hot teams in the entire NHL and are currently 8th in the entire league, and if you were to tell me a month ago that just a month later they'd be 8th, I would have said you're crazy. Next up, we have the Red Wings. And honestly, I'm just going to give them an F because everyone expected them to be bad. Yeah, but I didn't expect them to be this bad. It's honestly hard to watch at this point, and maybe I'm being too hard on them because I am a Red Wings fan, but it's just kind of embarrassing, especially over the past couple of games. Edmonton Oilers, another team, I'm definitely going to give them a grade of an A. I kind of thought maybe they'd cool off a little bit, but they have sustained their fantastic play and are still 4th in the entire league with a 16-8-3 record for 35 points. That McDavid and Draisaitl duo is just so fun to watch. If you guys haven't watched many Oilers games this year, I definitely suggest you do. Next up, we have the Florida Panthers, and honestly, I'm going to give Florida a grade of a C because I have been a little disappointed with them so far this season, especially Sergei Bobrovsky, and they are still 13th in the league, but with the roster that they have, they should be a little bit better, so I'm a little bit disappointed with them, but it's nothing to really be concerned about, and I think they will just get better as the season goes on and probably finish up around here. But for right now, I'm going to give them a C. Moving on now to the Los Angeles Kings, and this is kind of a tough one. I guess we'll just put them in the D tier because they are one of the worst teams in the league, but on most nights they have been competitive, and no one really expected them to be good anyways. Minnesota Wild, same case. No one really expected them to be good, but they aren't awful. They're not as awful as the Detroit Red Wings at least, so that's a plus for Minnesota, I guess. Next up, we have the Montreal Canadiens, and I'm going to put them in the C tier. They've kind of just been average so far this season, I will say. They're currently 18th in the entire league with 27 points, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I think I have said this multiple times on the channel before. If they finish this season kind of how they did last year, just missing out on the playoff spot by a couple of points, and that would definitely be tough for them because that's kind of like the worst spot to finish because you don't get a good draft pick most likely unless you get really lucky in the lottery, and you don't make the playoffs either. So hopefully for Montreal, they can go one of two ways: really bad and get a good draft pick, or continue to play well and eventually get in the playoffs. Next up, we have the Nashville Predators. They get a D for me. I thought they were going to be like a top 4 team in the NHL. They were definitely a team I labeled as contenders heading into the season, especially adding Matt Duchene. But so far this season, they only have 26 points through 24 games. They're 11-9-4, 22nd overall in the league, and have kind of just been disappointing so far. But we are only 2 months into the season, and there's plenty of time for them to turn it around. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils, and I think they're the only other team I'm going to put in the F tier with Detroit. And it's not that they've been as bad as Detroit, it's just we expected them to be a lot better with all the moves that they made over the offseason, and they only have 20 points through their first 23 games. They're 8-11-4, and things aren't really looking good for them in terms of keeping Taylor Hall around either. New York Islanders, 100%, I can't see how you don't put them in the A tier. They have relaxed a little bit after that ridiculous streak of games where they got a point. They were just winning games every single night, but still, they're 5th overall in the league, 16-5-2, and are continuing to prove people wrong, including myself. I honestly wasn't a believer in them heading into the season, but they definitely won me over. Next up, we have the Rangers, and I'm going to put them in the C tier because they did have some expectations heading into the year, adding Panarin, Trouba, and obviously Capo Caco. And I'm not going to say they've overachieved, and I don't really think they've been downright disappointing either, so I'm kind of just going to put them in the average tier. Next up, we have the Sens, and I think I'm going to put them in the C tier, and it's really just because everybody expected them to be downright awful heading into the season, and they're really not. They're competitive on most nights, and of course, after I made the video how they were surprising everyone and could potentially even make the playoffs, they have lost 2 in a row and are currently 28th overall in the league, but still, 23 points in 25 games isn't that bad, and they are having some players having individual success too, so I wouldn't call it an absolute disaster of a season so far. I think they've been okay. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Flyers. I'm going to put them in the B tier. They are a team that I expected to make the playoffs heading into the season. On paper, I just really like the look of that roster, and through 25 games, I think they've been pretty solid. They're 13-7-5. I believe they currently hold the second wildcard spot, so far so good for Philadelphia. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I'm going to put them in B tier, but like Colorado, you could make an argument that they should be in the A tier just because of how good they've been, even with all the injuries that the team has sustained. Once this Pittsburgh team gets healthy, I honestly think they could be one of the better teams in the entire NHL. That game last night against Vancouver was insane. One of the craziest regular season games I've ever saw. If you guys didn't catch that game, go watch the highlights because there was definitely no shortage of goals. Moving on now to the Sharks. I'm going to put the Sharks in the C tier because they definitely have been a lot better of late. They're back up over 500, and I think over the next couple of months, they're only going to continue to climb the standings and eventually finish in like a top 3 spot in their division. So I wouldn't really worry about them, but so far I think they've just been average. The St. Louis Blues, the defending Stanley Cup champions, they get an A from me. One of the best teams in the NHL, 15-5-6, and they're doing it all without Vladimir Tarasenko. And if he does come back this regular season in time for playoffs, there is a strong chance this team could run it back and make another deep playoff run. The Tampa Bay Lightning, I'm going to put them in the C tier. They haven't played a lot of games. I believe they've only played like 22, but they have been turning around after their awful start to the season and are currently like 4 games over 500 or something like that, so I wouldn't worry about them. And they're a team that, like the Sharks, I think will only continue to climb up this as the season rolls along. And now we have the Toronto Maple Leafs, and this is kind of a tough one because Mike Babcock's stint this season with them obviously wasn't very good, but since they fired him, they've been fantastic and look like a top team in the league under Sheldon Keefe. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and kind of base it off of what we've seen since then. But again, this is kind of based off the whole season, so if there was like a C+ tier, that's probably where I'd put them. But I'm going to give them a benefit of the doubt and put them in the B tier because they've looked fantastic over the past 3 games. I mean, they embarrassed Detroit last night. Next up, we got the Canucks, and if there was a C+ category, again, like the Leafs, I'd probably put them there. But I'm just going to stick them in the B spot because people did have expectations for them heading into the season. The hopes were that they would get better and be pushing for a playoff spot, and I think they're definitely on course to do that. They have cooled off a little bit over the past couple of weeks, but they're still 12-10-4, 15th in the league, so I'm going to give them a B rating. And a lot of players are having great individual success too, so that's always nice to see. Moving on now to the Vegas Golden Knights, and this is kind of a tough one. I'm going to put them in the C tier, but I was close to putting them in the D tier because I had high expectations for this team heading into the year. That roster on paper is very good. They had a great come from behind win last night against Nashville. I think they tied the game with 0.3 seconds left and then won in overtime, but it did come out that Fleury has left the team for personal reasons, so hopefully everything is okay with Fleury and nothing is very wrong there, but it's going to be tough for them without their number 1 goaltender, however long he's out for. Next up, we have the Caps. I can't see any scenario where they're not in A tier right now because they've just been very good. They're second in the league, only 4 regulation losses so far, and heading into the season, a lot of people picked them to win the cup, and looking at things right now, that's definitely not looking like a bad pick at all. And now finishing out the video with the Winnipeg Jets, I'm going to give them a grade of a B, but I was honestly close to giving them an A just because they're currently a top 10 team in the league. They're 10th overall, 15-9-1, and you look at that decor, they got no business being a top team. They've really played well considering everything they've lost. Hellebuck has looked great. A lot of their offensive guys have looked great too. Guys like Nikolai Ehlers and Laine haven't bounced back here, so far so good for Winnipeg. Don't know if they're going to keep it up, but for right now they get a B for me. So that is what my tier list looks like and all the grades that I'm giving these teams. If you guys disagree with any of my gradings, make sure to let me know down in the comment section below what your grade for that team would be. And if you guys did enjoy today's video and you want to see these videos every single month, make sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel for daily NHL content, and I will see you guys all in tomorrow's video.